Hello everyone, Max here with Fiction Rant to bring you part 7 of my Halo vs Mass Effect matchup. This section will cover the tactics utilized by each side. This section is going to be a bit weird since the tactics employed by both sides are often not really representative of typical strategy one would expect from either side, but really result instead from desperation to not be exterminated. With that in mind, we'll once again start with Halo and look at the totally conflicting strategic mindsets at play. For the UNSC, the strategy is basically a desperate we're going to lose, so let's make losing take as long as we possibly can situation. With very few exceptions, the UNSC lost every space battle they ever got involved with the Covenant, who were more advanced and more numerous. This led to things like the Cole Protocol, which was basically that as soon as contact was made with a Covenant vessel, UNSC ships, civilian and military alike, were supposed to delete all of their navigational data, including any onboard AI, and if they managed to get away, they were supposed to jump in a random direction first before attempting to return to any friendly location so they couldn't be followed as easily. This was all done because of Covenant strategy, which basically involved sending overwhelming numbers of ships to target planets, and once the space battle was won and any sacred Forerunner tech was secured, they'd use their ship weapons to glass the planet, boiling the oceans and scouring the land. All that said, we do get to see some really cool maneuvers in the book, so I'll tell you about my personal favorite, the Keyes Loop. This will be me nerding out about my favorite part of those books. In this encounter, the then Commander Keyes from Halo 1 was commanding the destroyer Iroquois, which had been outfitted with a pair of light MAC guns instead of the typical single heavy MAC gun. They encountered a small battle group of Covenant ships, including a carrier, a light destroyer, and a pair of frigates. He decided to go ahead and charge the Covenant destroyer at full speed and launched a nuke behind his ship, which he then had go completely dark so it would be hard to detect. This meant that it was still traveling forward the same direction as him, but much more slowly than normal. Meanwhile, the two frigates attempted to intercept and destroy his ship, while the destroyer basically just ignored him. They fired some of that homing plasma I've mentioned in previous sections at his vessel, but he utilized emergency thrusters to cause them to miss, at least at first. This being homing plasma, it began to loop around and try to hit him anyway. He then proceeded to get past those two frigates and then almost ram the Covenant destroyer, shaving off all the armor and one deck off the bottom of his ship in the process because of the Covenant shields. But the close proximity maneuver caused the Covenant plasma to get confused and hit their own destroyer, weakening it to the point where Keyes could open fire with normal missiles and finish it off. He then performed a slingshot maneuver around the planet they were all around, so he'd have a bit of cover while getting reoriented towards the two frigates. Around this time also, the frigates had come about and were trying to intercept again, putting them in proximity to that nuke that Keyes had launched earlier, and they didn't notice it. He then detonated the nuke, taking out their shields completely, and then one-shot each of them with his pair of MAC guns. The carrier then ran away. So yeah, in a straight numbers match, Keyes would have been about a match for a single one of those frigates, but through some fancy flying, he was able to get a whole maneuver named after him and come out very much ahead. On the ground, the strategy is much more simple. Everyone, Covenant and UNSC alike, use squad tactics with very little massed troop activity. Both factions make regular use of armored vehicles of a variety of types depending on the situation, and both try to adjust the type of weaponry that they're using in any particular situation to what the situation requires. Is this a full-fledged assault? Have a Scarab with support vehicles or a bunch of Scorpion tanks. Is this a surgical strike to recover some piece of Forerunner tech or rescue Dr. Halsey again? Time to send a bunch of invisible elites or, a Spartan. Also, UNSC smart AI are crazy powerful, so they often get used to either mess with or totally commandeer enemy computers, at least until they go crazy and attempt to exterminate humanity. Oh yeah, speaking of invisible elites, something I neglected to mention in the unique tech section that was pointed out in the comment section by Commando Epsilon, so shout out to you, thank you for that. Yeah, so the Covenant in general, but mostly the elites, so definitely the Sangheili Alliance, make wide use of active camouflage, which renders them nearly invisible while not interfering with the functionality of their shields. Thank you to Commando Epsilon once again. But yeah, being invisible is a hell of a combat asset, as it turns out. One last note I'd like to make regarding the Covenant side of the Halo end of this matchup is that the tactics we've seen are almost entirely those of Loyalist Covenant, who have ships and soldiers to spare. We're not talking about them, though. We're talking about the Sangheili Alliance. So they have far fewer ships and, troops, So they can't just burn them willy-nilly, but they still maintain this honorable or glorious combat mentality in war. We don't get to see too much of what they can do in action, but I'll assume that they're a bit more interested in, not losing ships than the Loyalists. But they still have a tendency to engage in battles that are way out of their weight class, as we get to see in Halo 3. Moving on to Mass Effect, once again, we don't really get a good idea of what the normal tactics for any Citadel faction really are, because basically all the space fighting we get to see is a desperate attempt to avoid extermination by the Reapers. This means there's a lot of space battles where everything including the kitchen sink approach is used, and this is where you, the player, Commander Shepard, come in. Half your job, particularly in Mass Effect 3, is to gather as many allies as possible to join together and try to fight together, and maybe live, or fight separately and die. I've actually been going back and forth a bit with commenter Fury Dragon about this, largely because I've been including the Quarians as a Citadel race, but not the Geth. My reasoning so far has been that the Geth were the antagonists of the first game, and sorta kind of antagonists in the other games, and it's only through some masterful diplomacy that you can get the support of both the Geth and the Quarians for the final battle. And since Tali is a teammate from the very beginning, I couldn't bring myself to not include the Quarians. Well, Fury Dragon, you'll be happy to know that I've seen the light, and I'm allowing the Geth in the fight as well. Basically, I'm giving the Citadel factions their best possible shot at this, so they get the Geth, Quarians, recently cured of the genophage Krogan on their side. I'll not talk about the Rachni too much beyond them existing and being scary in at least the ground combat scenarios. I don't think they actually have any space presence, which is baffling because they're supposed to be this threat to the whole galaxy, but they can't space travel, so I don't know what's going on with that. So yeah, as far as space combat strategy, I really don't have much to go on because everything was basically just a matter of getting a ton of ships together from all the factions and then go and try to smash the Reapers, or what it really amounted to. Keep dying to the Reapers, but keep them busy long enough for Commander Shepard to save the day. And Commander Shepard brings us to the ground strategy element. Basically, just like Halo, everything is squad-based. You don't see massed infantry anywhere, and while you get to see larger Geth walkers, which are basically tanks, and the Mako and Hammerhead vehicles from the Normandy, distribution of ground-based armored vehicles is much more limited than in Halo. Where the Citadel really excels in terms of strategy is through innovation and coming up with creative solutions to problems, and here's a few good examples I can run through. The Rachni, that I mentioned, were a scourge upon the galaxy, so the Solarians gave the Krogans spaceflight and used them as soldiers to very nearly drive the Rachni extinct. In fact, they thought they were extinct until you discover a queen during the games. This unfortunately meant that the Krogan were a new, potentially equally great threat to the galaxy, so instead of finding the next group of super tough, super scary, rapidly reproducing aliens to fight for them, they instead created the genophage as a means of keeping the population in check. When the Citadel was confronted with a Reaper for the first time, they quickly began to work out how exactly to actually kill the things, leading to the development of the Thanix cannon. When confronted with thousands of Reapers who began to purge the galaxy of all advanced life, the Citadel factions worked together to build and deploy the Crucible, based on Prothean technology, which would provide Commander Shepard the ability to put a red, blue, or green Instagram filter on the entire galaxy and decide its fate. The Geth 2 were a situation where, if you want, during the game, you could utilize a software exploit to basically override the Geth hive mind and turn them back into slaves if you really wanted to. In short, rarely is the best solution in a conflict in Mass Effect to just blow it up. Usually the solution is to blow up a few smaller things until you can get a hold of a MacGuffin, which then wins the bigger fight for you. And with that, there's my summary of the tactics on both sides. Let me know in the comments if there's anything significant I've left out, or if you agree with commenter Jacob W. that the Volus are the ultimate secret weapon of the Citadel that would stack the deck entirely in the favor of the Mass Effect side. And until next time, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you.